The crisp, metallic scent of silver polish was the only thing that cut through the cloying sweetness of jasmine macarons and derision. Elodie's hands moved, with an economy born of 1,000 repetitive motions, her knuckles grazing the intricate scrollwork of a serving tray that cost more than her entire life. From the adjoining conservatory, the laughter of the lady of the house, Isabel, tinkled like shattering glass. "Imagine," Isabel said, her voice a silken thread of contempt. "The theme is a night at Versailles, and she'll likely show up in polyester. Her friends, women, with faces as smooth and hard as Sèvres porcelain, joined in the laughter. They were talking about her." Elodie's spine stiffened, but her hands remained steady on the silver. For 2 years, she had perfected the art of being invisible. A ghost who cleaned, polished, and served in the sprawling Parisian Hotel Particulier of Lucien Beaumont. She moved through the quiet, minimalist spaces like a shadow, her presence noted only by the absence of dust or a glass, refilled without a sound. It was a form of safety. To be seen in this house was to be judged, and to be judged was to be found wanting, especially by Isabel, a woman who wore her husband's power like a borrowed coat, 2 sizes too large. Later that afternoon, Isabel found her in the main hall, where Elodie was dusting a centuries-old tapestry depicting a mythical hunt. She approached with a smile that never reached her eyes, a cobra swaying before it strikes. In her hand was a thick, cream-colored envelope embossed with the Beaumont family crest. "Elodie," she purred, extending the invitation. "My husband and I would be so honored if you would join us for our anniversary gala on Saturday." The 2 friends who flanked her watched with undisguised glee, their eyes hungry for her humiliation. It was a performance. The invitation was a weapon. They expected her to stammer, to refuse, to shrink. They wanted to watch her squirm, to remind her of the vast, uncrossable chasm between their world and hers. Elodie's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to make an excuse, to disappear back into the shadows where she belonged. But as she looked at Isabel's perfectly made-up face, at the casual cruelty swimming in her dark eyes, something else sparked within her, a quiet, cold ember of defiance. She had spent her life being underestimated, overlooked. That was her only advantage. She took the invitation, her unadorned fingers brushing against Isabel's manicured ones. "I would be honored, madame," she said, her voice even and clear. The flicker of surprise in Isabel's eyes was a small, satisfying victory. It was not the reaction she had wanted. Elodie gave a slight nod and walked away, the heavy invitation feeling like a death sentence in her hand. For the next 2 days, the weight of that choice pressed down on her. The gala was the biggest social event of the season for the Parisian milieu, a gathering of wolves dressed in bespoke suits and designer gowns. She was a lamb being led to slaughter. On Saturday evening, hours before the party, she unlocked a plain wooden chest kept under her narrow bed in the staff quarters. It was the only thing of value she owned, a legacy from Monsieur Renaud, the reclusive old man she had cared for in her teens. He had been a master couturier in his youth, a genius who had walked away from the world of fashion after a tragedy. He had left her this chest, and inside, nestled in layers of acid-free paper, was a single dress. "You wear this only when you have nothing left to lose, mon petit oiseau," he had told her, his voice a dry rasp. "When they have backed you into a corner and expect you to break, you do not break. You become the fire." She had nothing left to lose. She lifted it from the box. It wasn't just a dress, it was a statement. A river of crimson silk, so deep it was almost black, in the folds, embroidered with what looked like constellations of tiny, glittering diamonds along the bodice and cascading down one side. It was a masterpiece of such breathtaking artistry that it seemed to hum with its own life. Monsieur Renaud had called it Le Cœur du Volcan, the heart of the volcano. He said it was worth 2 million euros. She had thought he was being poetic. Looking at it now, she wasn't so sure. When she arrived at the mansion's grand entrance, she didn't use the staff door. She arrived in a black Citroen she'd paid for with a month's savings. The Centro, doorman, who saw her every day, stared, his mouth agape, as he opened her door. A single crimson silk heel touched the polished marble. Then another. Elodie stepped out of the car. The dress moved with her like liquid fire, the bezasemen, diamonds catching the light and scattering it into 1,000 brilliant shards. Her hair was swept up, showcasing the clean line of her neck and shoulders. Her makeup was minimal, letting the dress and her own quiet confidence do the work. She walked up the steps, her head held high. The murmur of the crowd at the entrance died instantly. A wave of silence spread. From the door inward, a ripple effect of pure shock. She saw them all. The Braceley lieutenants in their sharp suits. The women dripping in Cartier jewels. Isabel's friends, their faces frozen, ugly masks of disbelief. And then she saw him. Across the vast, crowded room, Lucien Beaumont stood like the calm at the center of a hurricane. He was talking to a rival boss, his posture one of relaxed authority. He was a man carved from stillness and shadow, his power absolute and unspoken. The subtle glint of a Patek Philippe watch peeked from the cuff of his stark white shirt. A subtle promise of the violence that lay beneath the promise-tailored Sifonelli suit. He had never given her more than a passing glance in 2 years, but now he lifted his head, his focus pulled by the sudden, deafening silence. His eyes, dark, intelligent, and utterly cold, swept the room until they landed on her, and they stopped. The polite disinterest on his face vanished, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. It was the look of a predator, spotting something inexplicable in its territory. He didn't see Elodie the maid. He saw an anomaly, a question, an impossibility wrapped in crimson silk. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, a held breath before the breaking of a storm. And in that moment, Elodie knew the safety of her invisibility was gone. Forever, the crowd parted for Lucien as if by an unseen force. He moved with a lethal grace, his eyes never leaving hers. The space around him seemed to cool, the air charged with his presence. He stopped directly in front of her. So close she could smell the clean, sharp scent of vetiver and something like cold stone from his cologne. He was taller than she'd realized, his shadow falling over her. His voice, when he spoke, was a low murmur that cut through the silence. "Who are you?" It wasn't the question she expected. Not, "Where did you get that dress?" Or, "What are you doing here?" It was more fundamental, more dangerous. He was asking who she was, really, beneath the borrowed finery and the carefully instructed mask of a servant. "My name is Elodie," she said, her own voice betraying a slight tremor she hated. "I work here." A flicker of something impatience perhaps crossed his features. "I know your name," he said. He pronounced it differently than anyone else, not the flat, dismissive tone of Isabel, but with a precise, clipped weight, as if testing the shape of it on his tongue. "That is not what I asked." Before she could answer, he took her arm. His grip was firm, inescapable, his fingers wrapping around her bare skin. A jolt, hot and sharp, shot through her. It was not violent, but it was absolute. "Come with me." It was not a request. He led her away from the gawking crowd, past his stunned wife whose face was a storm of fury and humiliation, and through a door that blended seamlessly into a paneled wall. They were in his office. The room was the man himself, minimalist, controlled, and devoid of warmth. A single, massive desk of black lacquer stood before a floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked a meticulously manicured Parisian garden. There were no personal effects, save for a single framed photograph on the wall of a smiling young woman with kind eyes. He released her arm, the absence of his touch leaving her skin feeling cold. He walked to the window, his back to her. "The dress," he said, his voice flat. "It is a message. I want to know who sent it and what they want." "No one sent it," Elodie said, finding a sliver of her courage. "It was mine." He turned slowly, one eyebrow raised in disbelief. "A dress of that value does not simply belong to a maid." It is either stolen or it is a payment. A down payment, perhaps, for a service from a rival. From Pascal. He named the man he had been speaking with, the head of a rival syndicate known for his flamboyant, reckless ambition. It wasn't stolen, she insisted, her chin lifting, and I don't know any. Pascal. The dress was a gift, a legacy. She would not tarnish Monsieur Renault's memory by explaining him to this man. It was the one piece of her past that was hers alone. Lucien studied her, his gaze analytical, stripping her down layer by layer. She felt exposed, not because of the dress, but because of the intelligence in his eyes. He was looking for the lie, the weakness, the angle. Extravagance draws flies, he said, his eyes flicking to the photograph on the Suez wall. A shadow of profound pain passed over his face, so quick she might have imagined it. And flies bring spiders. Those who wish to be seen are often the first to disappear, he was warning her. But it was more than that. He was speaking from a place of deep, personal loss. He was talking about the woman in the picture, the shame of a failure he carried, the wound that fueled his control. He saw her dress not as a triumph, but as a liability, a beacon painting a target on her back. And on his. A sharp knock on the door broke the tension. One of Lucien's lieutenants, a grim-faced man named Julien, entered and nodded. Sir, Pascal is asking for the young lady. Lucien's jaw tightened. He is to be told that the young lady is occupied. He is insistent, sir. He says he only wishes to offer his compliments on her beauty. Lucien was silent for a long moment. He looked at Elodie, a calculated coldness in his eyes. You will return to the party? You will stay by my side? You will not speak to anyone unless I approve it. Is that understood? Yes, she whispered. It was an order that felt like a cage, but under the circumstances, it also felt like the only sanctuary in the room. He led her back into the gala. The moment they stepped through the door, a hush fell again. But this time it was different. It was laced with fear. To stand beside Lucien Beaumont was a claim. He had marked her as his. As they moved through the room, she felt the heat of his body, a solid wall of power beside Baun. Here, Pascal, a man with a predatory smile and eyes that roamed over her like a physical touch, approached them. Beaumont, he said, his voice slick. You hide your most beautiful treasures. He bowed slightly to Elodie. A vision in red. I have never seen anything so exquisite. Lucien didn't even look at him. He simply shifted his stance slightly, placing himself more fully between Elodie and the other man. It was a subtle, animal gesture of possession. Pascal's smile tightened. He saw the gesture for what it was, a line drawn. After a tense moment, he gave a curt nod and retreated into the crowd. Lucien then looked down at her. You have made powerful men notice you tonight, Elodie, he said, his voice a low vibration against her ear. You had better hope you can survive the attention. The party ended, but the night was far from over. As Elodie made her way back towards the staff quarters, her borrowed courage fading with every step, Isabelle cornered her in a deserted corridor. The silken mask was gone, replaced by a raw, venomous fury. You think this is a game? She hissed, her fingers digging into Elodie's arm, much harder and crueler than her husband's grip had been. You think you can embarrass me in my own home? You are nothing. A little Bon who got lucky with a dress. I will strip it off you myself and burn it. She lunged, her nails aiming for Elodie's face. But before she could make contact, a hand shot out and seized her wrist. Lucien stood there, emerging from the shadows like he was made of them. He held his wife's wrist in a grip that made her gasp in pain. That is enough, Isabelle, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. She humiliated me, Isabelle cried, struggling against his hold. This thing. Lucien's eyes were chips of ice. You humiliated yourself. You tried to use a guest in my home for your amusement. You failed. Now, go to your rooms. He released her with a slight shove. Isabelle stumbled back, her face a mask of shock and hatred, before turning and storming away. Lucian turned his attention to Elodie. He looked at the red marks forming on her arm where Isabel had grabbed her. His expression was unreadable. "You are no longer a maid," he stated. "Your position is a security risk. You will be moved to the West Wing suite. You will act as my personal assistant. Your duties will be whatever I require." It was a promotion that felt like a prison sentence, a gilded cage. "For your safety," he added, as if reading her mind. The next few days were a blur of disorientation. Her simple room was replaced by a luxurious suite that overlooked the Seine. Her uniform was replaced by a wardrobe of expensive, understated clothing that appeared as if by magic. She was no longer invisible. The staff now watched her with a mixture of fear and resentment. She was Lucien Beaumont's property. The danger he'd warned her about didn't take long to manifest. He sent her on an errand to a specialty bookstore in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, a test of some kind. As she was crossing a quiet side street, a black sedan with tinted windows accelerated directly toward her. Time seemed to slow. There was the scream of tires, the roar of the engine. She froze, her mind blank with terror. At the blank last second, another car, one she had noticed was tailing her, slammed into the sedan, sending it careening into a wall. Two of Lucien's men emerged, guns drawn. It was over in seconds. They drove her back to the mansion in silence. She sat in the back, her body trembling uncontrollably, the image of the headlights burning behind her eyes. When they arrived, Lucien was waiting. He took one look at her pale face and the slight tremor in her hands and a muscle in his jaw clenched. He dismissed his men and led her into the garden, the one she could see from his office. He didn't speak, just stood beside her as the city sounds faded, replaced by the gentle trickle of a water feature. The sight of her, so close to being erased, had clearly shaken him. The calculated coldness in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of raw, possessive fury. "This was Pascal," he said finally. It was a statement of fact. "He is testing my response. By trying to kill me?" she asked, her voice thin. "By trying to take something from me." He corrected her, his gaze intense. In the days that followed, the house became a fortress and a pressure cooker. Lucien needed to know who inside his organization was feeding Pascal information. The attack was too well timed. The leak had to be close. He suspected one of Isabel's friends, a woman named Monique, who had family ties to Pascal's clan, but he had no proof. Elodie, now confined to the house, fell back on her old skills. She moved, quietly. She listened. She had spent 2 years learning the rhythms of this place, the secrets whispered in corridors when the masters were away. One afternoon, while arranging flowers near Isabel's now deserted conservatory, she heard Monique on the phone, her voice low and urgent. She was speaking about a shipment, a route, a time information that could cripple one of Lucien's most profitable operations. Elodie froze. She held in her hands the life of a woman. To tell Lucien would be to sign Monique's death warrant. His justice was swift and final. To stay silent would be to leave herself and him vulnerable to another attack. She was a maid, a girl from a quiet neighborhood who cared for an old man. This world of silent executions and brutal power plays was not hers. But it was her reality now. She had worn the red dress. She had walked into the fire. That evening, she went to his office. He was looking over documents, the lamplight carving his face into sharp angles. He looked up as she entered. "I heard something," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She laid out the details. She had overheard, her words precise, clinical. She did not look at him. She stared at her own hands, twisting in her lap. She had just condemned someone. She had crossed a line she could never uncross, stepping from the world of innocent into his. He listened without interruption. When she was finished, the silence was heavy, absolute. He stood up and walked to the bar, pouring 2 glasses of Armagnac. He handed one to her. "You did what was necessary to survive," he said. She looked up at him then, her eyes flashing. "Is that all this is? Survival?" He held her gaze, and for the first time, she saw a genuine crack in his armor. The cold, tactical mind gave way to something raw and honest. "I told myself, keeping you close was a matter of security," he said, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. "For your protection." He took a step closer. The space between them electric. It was a lie. The confession hung in the air, more dangerous and intimate than any declaration of love. He didn't want to protect her. He just wanted her. The next morning, Monique was gone. No one spoke of it. It was as if she had never existed. But the threat wasn't gone. That evening, a package arrived for Lucian. Inside was a single withered black rose and a photograph. It was a picture of the small, unassuming apartment building in Belleville where she had grown up. On the back, a single sentence was scrawled. "I know where all your treasures come from." Pascal was no longer targeting Lucian's new possession. He was targeting Elodie. Pascal's message was a declaration of war, with her as the battlefield. The photograph of her old home was a violation, a predatory hand reaching into a past she thought she had left behind. Lucian burned it in a heavy crystal ashtray, the edges curling into blackness, but the threat remained, hanging in the air like toxic smoke. "He will try to lure you out," Lucian said, his voice a low growl. "He will use something from your past, something he thinks you cannot resist." He was right. 2 days later, a call came not to the mansion's secure lines but to a small disposable phone Lucian had given her. The number was blocked. When she answered, the voice on the other end made her blood run cold. It was her former landlady, Madame Lefebvre, a kind, elderly woman who had always looked out for her. She was weeping. "Elodie, my dear, some men. They said you need to come. They have my son." It was a clumsy one. Madame Lefebvre's son lived in Lyon. But the panic in the old woman's voice was real. Pascal had her. He was using a fragile, innocent woman as bait. "Where?" Elodie asked, her voice tight with a cold fury that surprised her. Madame Lefebvre sobbed out an address, a closed bistro in a quiet industrial part of the city. When she told Lucian, his face became a mask of stone. "It is a trap. I know," she said. "I'm the bait. But he has Madame Lefebvre. I have to go." "We go," he corrected her, his eyes blazing. This was not just business. Pascal had made it personal. He had reached into Lucian's home and used an innocent to threaten the woman he now considered his. It was an insult that could only be answered with blood. They didn't go in with guns blazing. Lucian's approach was, as always, surgical. He and 2 of his most trusted men, dressed in simple, dark clothing, entered the bistro through a rear service entrance they'd breached moments before. Elodie was with them, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Lucian had wanted her to stay in the car. She had refused. "This started with me," she'd said. "I will see how it ends." He had looked at her, a flicker of something like respect in his eyes, and given a single, sharp nod. The main room of the bistro was dimly lit. Pascal sat at a small table, a smug smile on his face. Madame Lefebvre was huddled in a corner, terrified but unharmed. Pascal's men were positioned around the room, arrogant in their numbers. "Ah, the little bird comes to the cage," Pascal said, his eyes landing on Elodie. "And you brought the dragon with you. How touching." Lucian stepped forward into the light, his hands empty, his presence alone. "Weapon. Let the woman go, Pascal. Your business is with me. My business is with whatever you value," Pascal sneered, gesturing toward Elodie. "And you, my dear, are vastly overvalued. A pretty distraction. He will tire of you. Just as he tired of his wife. Just as he tired of the one before." He nodded towards the exit. He failed to protect his first love. He will fail? You too. The barb hit its mark. Elodie saw Lucian's posture tense. The wound Pascal had so casually ripped open, bleeding fresh pain. And in that moment, watching Pascal's gloating face, Elodie's fear burned away, leaving behind a diamond-hard clarity. She had been observing, learning. She remembered overhearing 2 of Pascal's own men at the gala complaining about his recklessness, about a recent deal where he had shorted them their share. They had called him a peacock, all feathers and no honor, while Pascal's attention was locked on Lucien, reveling in his perceived victory. Elodie took a half-step forward. Her voice, when she spoke, was not loud, but it was clear and carried across the silent room. "Is this what the Moreau brothers died for?" she asked, her gaze sweeping over Pascal's men. "So he could steal their share of the Marseille shipment to buy himself another car?" A confused murmur went through Pascal's soldiers. They looked at each other, then at their boss, whose smug smile faltered. Elodie's words, a shot in the dark based on a scrap of drunken gossip, had hit a nerve. She had introduced a single, potent seed of doubt. She had used intelligence, not force. That was the opening Lucien needed. The room exploded into motion. Lucien moved like a blur, not toward Pascal, but toward his two closest guards. It was a choreography of violence, precise, brutally efficient. In the chaos, as Pascal's men hesitated, their loyalty, fractured by Elodie's words, Lucien's own men secured Madame Lefebvre and neutralized the remaining threats. Pascal, his trap falling apart, pulled a knife and lunged for Elodie. He was wild, desperate. Lucien intercepted him, a blur of black cloth and controlled fury. There was a sickening thud, a grunt of pain. When it was over, Pascal lay on the floor, and Lucien was standing over him, his arm bleeding freely from a dank, deep gash. A price had been paid. In the silent aftermath, back in the sterile safety of Lucien's office, Elodie carefully cleaned the wound on his arm. The scent of antiseptic mingled with the metallic tang of his blood. Her hands, once used to polishing silver, were now steady as they stitched his skin, a skill she'd learned caring for Monsieur Renault's many small injuries. He watched her, his expression unguarded for the first time. The man of violence and calculation was gone, replaced by someone more vulnerable. He reached up with his uninjured hand and gently touched her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "My men are loyal because I pay them," he said, his voice quiet and rough. "My family is loyal because of blood. But you," he paused, his dark eyes searching hers, "you are loyal because you chose to be." It wasn't a declaration of love. In his world, it was more. It was the ultimate acknowledgement. He saw her not as a possession, but as an ally, an equal. Pascal was right about one thing, he continued, his thumb stroking her skin. "You are my weakness." He held her gaze, the intensity there stealing her breath. "And my only strength." Weeks passed. The mansion grew quieter. Isabelle was gone, her presence erased, as completely as Monique's had been. Lucien had dissolved their marriage, a politically and financially costly move that severed ties with a powerful family, all without a word of explanation to his lieutenants. The ripples were still being felt throughout his empire. Elodie was no longer a maid in a uniform or a spectacle in a borrowed gown. Tonight, she wore a simple, elegant black dress. She stood at the grained, floor-to-ceiling window in his office, the same window he had stood before when he first interrogated her. The lights of the Paris skyline glittered below like a fallen constellation. He had offered her a way out, a new identity, a new life, anywhere in the world, a bank account with enough money to ensure she would never have to serve anyone again. Complete freedom, guaranteed and protected by the long shadow of his power. The choice was hers to make. He entered the office, silent as ever, and came to stand behind her. He didn't touch her, but she felt his presence as a tangible warmth at her back. There, reflections were captured side by side in the dark glass, two stark figures, against the vast, glittering expanse of the city. She looked at his reflection, the severe lines of his face, the stillness of his posture, the man carved from silence and danger, who had shown her a terrifying, possessive tenderness. She thought of the red dress, of the girl she had been. She thought of the woman she was becoming. She didn't turn around. She kept her eyes on their reflections, on the city that sprawled before them, a kingdom of light and shadow. "I think I like the view from here," she said softly. It was not a surrender. It was not a declaration of love. It was a choice. Her choice. To stay in the fire, and finally, truly, become it.